All right, everyone, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started on today's Relate session. So for our visitors, this is a roughly weekly seminar series that we do. Some campuses call it a Dean's Hour or something like that. It's about 3 times a month. It's roughly once a month. We have shelf exams, and we don't usually do this on the week of a shelf exam. So we do this about 3 times a month. And we do lots of different topics. Some of them are very focused on like prep for residency and things that you need to do for that. Some of them are focused when you start 3rd year. We have current students who give feedback on how to be a successful 3rd year student. We have lots of various sessions throughout the year. Some of them are just purely interesting and get you really thinking, and that's what we have today with Dr. Alan Blum. He is a family physician here and is a professor of family medicine. He came here in 1999 after having taught at the Baylor College of Medicine for almost 12 years. He is a graduate of the Emory School of Medicine, did an internship at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and completed a family medicine residency and fellowship at the University of Miami. Dr. Blum is also a self-taught artist and has published 3 books of sketches and stories of patients. His drawings have appeared in more than a dozen medical journals, including JAMA, the Fellows of the Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society, and the Canadian Medical Association Journal, in which his artwork was featured in each issue from June 17th through August, I forgot the year, I'm sorry. And this is a quote commenting on Dr. Blum's drawings in the Journal of Literature and Medicine. Professor Mary Winford, the Institute of Medical Humanities at the University of Texas, Galveston, wrote, and this is all a big long quote: Blum is a physician who sees events for art in his patients, individual personalities who act in a human drama of courage, despair, humor, pettiness, suffering, and death. Dr. Blum began sketching patients as a medical student at Emory. He uses his sketches to learn something beyond the compass of technological medicine. He draws to learn more about his patients and to fix them in his mind. When, for example, he looks at an old sketch of a long-dead patient, he provides that to his imagination. In doing so, he tacitly responds to the tradition of portraiture in Western history. The portrait, after all, is the product of an individualist sensibility, and the genre was created to memorialize the permanent over distance and time, even after death. So there is knowledge to be gained through the sketches. For Blum, knowledge about the patient. For the viewer, knowledge of the meaning of the patient, or of being human, fallible, and mortal. Alan Blum's sketches are one medical practitioner's response to the fragmentation and disintegration of a long tradition of observation. Through his sketches with their scraps of dialogue, Blum has reconciled 2 kinds of knowledge that have long been separated: the powerful and objective knowledge made possible by imaging technology, and the artist's knowledge of a person as an individual and a whole. And I'm happy to turn it over to Dr. Blum.
Thanks, Dale. Quite an incredible guy. He's coordinated all of this. Who's our new folks that are here today? That's wonderful. Nice to see you. And our Relate folks usually are here. They're good. I also asked if they might share a moment, a story, and that they've experienced, because we're going to talk about a lot of stories. I'm a professor of family medicine. This is my 50th year as an MD. I went to Emory University School of Medicine. Later this year, I hope to come back and give a talk called 50 Clinical Pearls in 50 years. I have had a pretty joyful time. My father was a family doctor who practiced 37 years in the same town that he was raised in. And I've seen a lot. I think that I don't have to warn you that this talk is going to be hazardous to your preconceptions. I think we know what we're dealing with, a very difficult, very challenging, but also very gratifying and wonderful feeling. So I was in the office at Baylor College of Medicine at a very busy clinic on Friday afternoon. I was running late, as Andrew and Brian will tell you, and I kept this poor lady an hour and a half, and I walked in, I recognized her. She was head of medical records at another hospital. And I said, I see that you're here for a cold. Now, come on, you're in medicine. Do you really have to wait an hour and a half to see me for a cold? She says, you don't understand. He says, I've just won the state award for the best medical records department. And tomorrow I want to drive my parents with me to go have them see me get this award. I said, well, that sounds wonderful. No, you don't understand. My dad's being treated for cancer, and I'm really worried I'll give him my cold. I said, oh, well, how about this? How about rolling down the window, get some fresh air? She says, no, you don't understand. My mom likes the air conditioning. So now we got a dilemma. And I said, okay, hold on one second. I think I heard something the other day. Let me go check it out. I went online, checked with Southwest Airlines. They had a $19 round trip special because they just started flying to Austin. I booked 3 tickets for less than the tank of gas that she would have had to spend. I came back, I gave her the good news, and she started to cry. And I said, I understand. I've saved you time. You could talk to your parents. You got fresh air. You don't have to worry about it. You'll be there and back before you know it. She says, you just don't understand. I'm 49 years old. I'm the middle of 5 children. And I've never been on a trip alone with my parents. Sometimes tears are tears of joy. And that's what I experienced that day. Last week, lady says, can I tell you something? I had dementia. I have never heard that phrase. I had dementia. 4 or 5 years. Even put me in a memory ward. But I had enough up here still going on to start praying. I believe in prayer. I came back. I'm not normal, but I'm improved. I believe God had a lot to do with it. I mean, he had to. That literally was just about word for word what she told me a week ago. Moments like that, you just couldn't imagine what you never know from day to day. And that's the joy of family medicine. One of the residents a few years ago was very frustrated. I was running up to them and said, I don't understand. They've got me with a patient. I've got to do a whole physical exam and a history. And she's got some kind of condition because she's like this and she's contorted and she's in a wheelchair and she can't speak. What am I supposed to do? I said, is she with someone? Well, yeah, it's her mother. I said, well, have you talked to the mother? Well, yeah, but just calm down, let's go in. And I see her, I recognized her, and she's smiling and saying hello, and I recognize she had cerebral palsy. And the first question I said to the mom was, what does she like to do? And the mother says, she loves to read. So I said, if she loves to read, why don't you get her one of these hip things so she can point to the letters and let you know what's going on? She says, because she's got a foul mouth. I mean, by this point, the resident was like this tall. Because he's looking at this as an entirely medical procedure. I got to do this. I got to remember all the checklists, yes and no. How can I ask yes and no questions? And I said, what does she like to read? She said, well, Danielle Steele novels. So, I mean, this is a bright woman encompassed in a difficult disease. There's no more, I think, more tragic condition than cerebral palsy when you've got complete mental capacity. And, it's not what the textbooks say. You just don't see what we experience in the textbooks. I asked if the Relate students could share some moments, and it's got some great ones. I just want to read one, because she wouldn't let me, she wouldn't read it herself. I was consistently around. I asked her just to describe a memorable moment that you've had with a patient or in the hospital or in the clinic. And she says, I was consistently rounding on a patient after she's had a lengthy invasive surgery. This patient had come to the hospital alone and had no family or emergency contact. She had only come to DCH with her phone, wallet, and the clothes she was wearing. After her surgery, she was moved to the ICU from the floor, and in the process, her phone, wallet, and clothes were lost. I felt that way too when I read that. On her second day post-op, she told me about these missing items, and she was bedbound. She could literally do nothing, even try to find her things. I went to the floor, and after some scavenging, a nurse helped me find her bag of things sitting on a random sink. When I brought these things to her, she was so grateful and thanked me repeatedly, then later cried, explaining how these things were all she had. A great reminder that some of the most meaningful ways that we get to help patients doesn't always involve medicine. We can read some more later, but man, I just think, Kayla, thank you very much for that wonderful thing. Tell me a story. I think that's one of the most endearing and tender requests. And as a family physician, I'm blessed and privileged to care for patients who tell me their stories. And each of us in healthcare is constantly honing our story listening and our story facilitating skills. And how do you do that? You don't say what brought you in today, because half the time people say the bus. You know, you want to know how they got there, so you know whether they're driving or they have, but you want to know not so many yes or no questions. You want to know who's at home. What do you like doing? How do you spend your time? Do you work out of the home? What's the value of a homemaker, by the way, on the open market? Because I have people say to me when they report this, oh, just a house. What is that? What's on the open market would they earn if they were being paid for that? Say what?
About 300 grand.
Well, I would go for the higher amount. It's about 120 to 140,000. Thank you. Excellent. I think that's a good, but it's not just, nobody is just. Today, I'd like to share with you some of my patient stories and the mix of emotions they inspired. I've kept, when I was a resident, I kept a black and white composition book with lined paper, the kind we used in grade school, that I compiled as an intern at the Royal Victoria Hospital, Montreal. I put newspaper clippings, scraps of dialogue jotted down on rounds, and the index cards for admissions for patients. Every surface imaginable, examining room paper, prescription pads, just all jumped into this book, and I look at it from time to time, and that's where I'm going to draw from today. To me, a simple sketch of a patient provides a necessary balance to the computer-based radiologic images we now count on to tell us what we believe a patient really looks like. There's a group of radiologists in Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York that demands to have a photograph of the patient when they look at their X-ray. I think that's a nice humanistic touch. These sketches bring back the essence of an individual encounter. Each face, surrounded by jotted notes, recalls a detail of personality, a conversation, and illness. And I see in the sketches and hear in the notes fragments of the human condition. My eyelashes, my hair, everything hurts. I came in early today, doctor, because I had this weird psychic feeling you were running on time. A young woman with multiple sclerosis saying to me, I dance, slow dance, as long as someone can hold me up. Ain't no good doctor. When you walk in, he just shake your hand and tell you what kind of medicine you need. Or they just sit there listening to the story of your life, then just write your prescription. Well, I'm not an artist. I've never played one on TV. I did a little course in studio art in college, and I majored in English literature, enjoyed it very much. And I think that talking with a patient is like reading a poem. Perhaps it's best described by a patient I once had. I asked her what she did for a living. She says, Doctor, I does poetry. I said, wonderful. Can you read me one of your poems? She says, Doctor, I plucks chickens. Poetry was what she was saying. I heard it wrong. So for that matter, I think we in medicine can do a better job of making our day-to-day language more poetic, less laden with jargon and acronyms from our point of view, and focus instead more closely on the words and stories that patients are telling us. For example, I give residents and students a note from a chart. Patient said he had a PE. They send me that and it had PE. Was it pulmonary embolus, pulmonary edema, physical exam, proctoscopic exam, penis envy, paranoid end stage, Protestant Episcopal, presiding elder, potential energy, just go on and on. Please avoid the acronyms. You're not showing off to anybody. Even if you think everybody knows, don't do it. WDWN, NAD, GSW, ABD. Honestly, that's how one went on. Well-developed, well-nourished woman, no acute distress, gunshot wound to abdomen. Don't do it. No, you don't want to describe that of an adult woman anyway. You want to talk about well-developed, well-nourished women in the NICU where we see babies developing. So today, let's demedicalize. Let's undo the technology. Let's stand, sit, gaze, prolong the encounter. And I wake up with these images in my mind and these stories. I'd like you to keep your eyes and your ears wide open, not just today, but in general with patients, because we're going to talk about aging, anxiety, technology, what patients think of it, and how we rely on it, sexuality, dieting, AIDS, death. And with that, my favorite painting, last year we did a whole slew of paintings, but I thought we'd just simply focus on a couple of my favorites. Why is that a favorite of mine? Well, who is in that painting? Who do you think? You can say anything you'd like. Who comes to mind? Anything? Even if you know the painting, say it out loud, whatever you'd like to say.
Doctor and patient.
Doctor and patient. How did you think of that?
If he's holding something that looks like an instrument and that patient looks sick.
Yes, I think that's a great observation. Yeah. To me, it looked like that when I first saw it. I knew a little bit about it. And boy, what an experience I had after years of loving this painting. Being in Minneapolis at the art museum and walking down a hallway and suddenly seeing that I had no idea where it was located, but being there up close. So anything more about that? Anybody like to comment more about that? How about some of the guys on this side? Say whatever you want. Okay, when was the last time anyone was in an art museum? When was the last time?
Like a week and a half ago.
Good, that makes you an expert. Do you have any comments?
I honestly, kind of when I look at it, I feel like the sick person probably just nobody important. Well-
Meaning.
Just somebody.
Right, take the position is caring for, right.
And then I kind of like the look on the physician's face.
He is.
He's like, oh yeah, this will do it.
Great.
And that guy's just, or lady, I'm not even sure, is just obviously wishing that they were probably dead.
Oh,
So,
it could be, yeah, could be.
sorry.
No, I so appreciate your comment. Any other thoughts, any random comments at all? Anything about the color, the shape, the sitting? Go ahead.
I got the impression that the person who's sick is probably more important. I think background gives a lot of indication of the faces that surround that interaction.
Well, especially now, at least for the last 6 weeks, I think we're all important. So, in any event, read it as you may, but I like the word, I mean, it's not my thing, but by important, you meant someone that we might recognize or know about in that regard.
Or give you attention to.
Mhm. More, but I hope not more worthy of attention. In any event, any further guesses as to who might that be? Well,
It looks like maybe it's the first time he's even been on today.
oh, interesting. Yeah, physician has to call and get him on the physician schedule. No, I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, this is a famous person. It was the artist himself, Goya, who was sick and who lost his hearing as a result of this operation, this disease that no one to this day knows what it was. But in gratitude toward his nurturing physician, Dr. Arriaga, he painted this portrait of him, of the doctor. And I think it's this epitomizes, maybe a little hokey, but it certainly epitomizes what we all think we'd like to be doing to care for our patients. At the other extreme, when I first started going to art museums, because I was going to a lot of these boring medical meetings, I decided to just take off in Kansas City and walk, and I saw this beautiful building, it was called the Nelson Art Gallery. And I walked in, and among the paintings I saw that day was this one, and I laughed out loud. And people looked at, well, you can laugh in a museum, you can enjoy, you can appreciate, you don't have to just stand and look and whisper. And why would I be laughing at that? Anyone want to comment on this particular painting? It's called The Illness of Pierrot, or Little Pierre. Anything at all? Who is, what's going on here? So we have 4 figures there and anything. Why follows on the board? It could be. So who's the focus of attention here? I think it's the guy in the bed, or it could be the fancy guy with the stockings and the nice hat and the staff, maybe a staff of escalate. You know what I'm saying? Serpent on the staff. So who is who? Is that mysterious? It's called The Illness of Pierrot. So who's ill? Pierrot. Okay, Pierrot, and he's in bed. What else? Who's the other? And what's the other person doing there? Jester. Well, there's a jester in the background. That's right. There's a jester there. Yeah, and he's doing this. We got 2 other people. Who are they? Take a guess.
Maybe like a housekeeper, and then the guy sitting down is maybe the doctor.
You got it. I think that's, to me, my interpretation of it. So this guy's sick. He's doing what? He's feeling the pulse, as you got to do if you're a doctor. You've got to touch them, which is good. And he's over there. He's doing something, and she is looking at this guy. You know what's on her face. I know what's on her face. I don't have to see her facial expression. What is her facial expression? To the doctor.
Questioning, concern.
Are you nuts?
Mhm.
That's what I would think she's doing, because she's looking at him as she's cleaning up the room. He's trying to figure out and act important, trying to take the pulse to figure out what's going on. He knows what's going on. She knows what's going on because of, what did Brian say? The guy has alcoholism. One of the hardest things to diagnose if you don't have wine bottles to give it away. I've gone, several years not knowing a patient of mine had severe alcoholism. So it's not easy, but when you have all the clues there. And what is the jester doing? He's probably banging his head. This guy, this is so crazy, because everybody in the room but the doctor knows what's going on. Little sign of humility. And he whose science exceeds his sense perishes by his ignorance. That's the rough translation of the little writing up there, making fun of the doctor that thinks he knows it all. Really, the others know just as much, if not more, because they're with the patient. They understand the patient. That's my mom, who went to this university, at least for a time, and that's a little caption that says she represented the University of Alabama in a debate at Columbus, Mississippi, and won a unanimous decision against Mississippi State College for Women. So I have this connection. I didn't know it when I came to give the commencement talk to the residency in 1997, and did some of these very same stories and sketches. And afterwards, the chairman, Jerry McKnight, came up to me and said, would you like to stick around? And I thought he meant, let's go out for beer. But he had an idea that they had this professorship here to do a little bit more about humanities and art. And he said, why don't you apply? And that's how I got this. The reason I got selected to be the commencement speaker has to do with being nice to people. And that's the nice person that I seem to have been nice to was my former secretary at Baylor. I had hired her among a whole pool of applicants, and I shared her with 3 other faculty and, doing all the work. And she was so terrific in her job that she caught the attention of the whole head of the department, who co-opted her to run the whole residency program as the administrator within 2 weeks of starting the job. Big loss for me, great gain for the department, but then she got married a couple of years later, moved to Kansas City, walked into one of the other family practice programs, said I used to be the administrator, and they hired immediately. She did that for a few years. Then her husband was transferred to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Walked into the residency office here and said, I see you're looking for a new administrator. She was hired here. At the end of her first year, they were looking for a speaker for graduation, and here I am. So it's just an interesting story. You never know who's going to help without even knowing. And that's my dad, who loved the practice of medicine, from the 7 a.m. hospital rounds to the after-supper house calls. His office was in our home, where every afternoon the living room became the waiting room. His favorite day was Monday, when he could start the week anew, seeing patients in the very place he'd been raised, Rockaway Beach, New York, also home of Jonas Salk vaccine, and Burl Crohn's disease. But it wasn't just his knowledge, his clinical skill, his compassion, or his love of medicine that most endeared him to patients. Rather, it was his way of speaking, down to earth, sprinkled with humor, listening closely, making small talk, asking questions that showed he cared. Where are you from? Who's at home? What do you do? What do you like doing? He never lost sight of the patient's world beyond the examining room. He was a kind of an environmentalist. He learned the nuances of the ever-changing neighborhood, picking up on slang and dialect, or teaching himself Spanish for his Puerto Rican patients. I came home one day and he kept on saying the same Spanish phrase over and over again. I said, Dad, what does that mean? He says, please pee in the bottle. Please pee in the bottle. When I came here, you think you could just plop down into Tuscaloosa, Alabama and start practicing medicine coming from New York? So I couldn't imagine the number of people that said they were from Utah. I mean, how did that many people emigrate from way out west? It's EUTAW, it's right down the road. So, you learn every day. He'd stop to talk with the hospital handyman, the priest, or the policeman. I think he felt that to be a good doctor and know how to give just the right advice meant learning from the patients in their environment too. And this was the telegram we used to have that someone sent my mom when my dad passed away. Myself and 2 young boys were the doctor's patients. Please know you have my sympathy. Your husband, Dr. Blum, was a beautiful man, a good doctor, and wonderful human being. Must be proud, dear lady. You have my prayers and tears. A good doctor and man comes but once in a lifetime. So again, tell me a story. Let's see if we can hone in on the waiting room, which is where I started sketching. I would go out and engage people in conversation, and this was one of the early groups that I did. And I sent it to the Journal of the American Medical Association, which published it, and it's really the only such thing of its kind that they've ever done. And what I wrote was, in the clinical years of medical school and on through internship and residency, I'd often sit in the outpatient waiting areas and strike up conversations. With the person's permission, I'd spend a few minutes sketching him or her and jotting down our dialogue. My medium was simple: black ballpoint pen and whatever paper was handy, blotters, prescription pads, or notebooks with advertisements at the bottom for Aldactazide or Actifed. We're so excited, we're so accustomed to the bustle, excitement, and challenge of a hospital that it's hard to imagine the stillness, solemnity, and fear found in the waiting room. Among the nearly 3,000 patients I'd sketched at that time, there had been few smiles. There is, as one woman described it, much worryation. And, this poor lady, she's very intent on telling me what was going on. She says, they had my mother in the hospice for a year, but she wasn't terminal enough, so they terminated her. I like older doctors, this lady said. They seem to talk to you more, just like you talking. Younger doctors seem to be in such a hurry. I had one doctor used to have to chase him down the hall, grab on his white coat, flitting up and down. You want to ask him something, you have to run him down. Or that same lady, I don't like going to the doctor. They just sit there listening to the story of your life. The doctor is a very important part of your life, your doctor's is. I don't want to hurt his feelings, but really he didn't do anything for me. I asked this lady the secret of her long life. She was 96 when I sketched that. And she thought a minute, and then she said, oh, I tended a cow. And I'd be out in the open a lot. Her name was Molly. And then she said, my friends are all years younger than me, but I am still younger than they are. And this lady had a little different attitude. She said, there are not many advantages to being from Laredo, Texas. What can you do for my age? It'd be better if we could just evaporate. We all might elect to evaporate a little bit sooner. I don't know whoever invented old age, but I'm against it. Or this lady said, I'm older than I look because I worried myself to death all my life. Or this lady, that doctor I saw didn't know anything about polio. Said it just weren't her generation to know nothing about it. I can't remember that doctor's name, as many bills as I got from him. This was a mother and daughter. I almost couldn't tell who was whom, but they would come in and they were so wonderful. This is back when I was a resident. I don't sketch children that much because they move around, but I often ask, I recommend that you ask every child, what do you do for a living? And usually, it's, I stay in my house and play. One time I said to the 6-year, she's a very intense 6-year, I said, what do you do for a living? She says, doctor, I am a child. Or do you work? My job is to take care of my toys. I say, are you in college? I'm still 4, but I'm fixing to be 5 in 1 more year and I can play T-ball. And, somebody asked me, are you the principal? Or I see you've been going to church, doctor, because I come in with a tie. And then one child said, what do you got to do to get this job? So I said, I have to smile a lot at people and talk to them and ask questions and listen to, like Dr. House. You remember Dr. House? Mean guy on TV. So there was a 12-year-old, and I asked her what she did for a living. She said, well, I play basketball. I said, really? I said, she said, our family's mostly tall, and they play a lot of basketball. My father, he's tall. He lives in Maryland. I haven't seen him in over a year, but I think he plays a lot of basketball. I got another sister in Maryland, and she's tall, so I'm guessing she plays a lot of basketball, too. So it's just whatever you hear on a daily basis, you just try to jot down. And this guy, I knew him for a long time. I took him to a ball game, tried to get to know him a little bit better because we had a little baseball stadium down the street from the clinic. And I couldn't really do much for his blood pressure and everything else. So I decided, as I was advised by my chairman, to go make a house call, which wasn't too far. I could actually walk from the hospital. And I did. And the first thing he told me to do, by the way, Lynn Carmichael, was to go and excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, wash your hands under the guise of peeking in the medicine cabinet to see what's going on. And sure, there they were, all in chronological order, all of the prescriptions I'd given him, unfilled. I mean, he got in the bottles, but he wasn't taking his medicine. And, he gave me, some good advice, though. He says, see, my other doctor didn't explain. I said, whoa, you got to talk to me like you're not in school. I had to go through the grapevine. He didn't explain. All he did was give me a lecture on blood pressure. Well, I mean, I'm not a doctor. You have to explain. You have to draw me a picture and color. Another one said here in Tuscaloosa, he done good, that doctor. It's the first time a doctor ever broke it down where even a whole country boy can understand. And then we had a man, when I was an intern in the hospital, first time in the hospital, he was in his late 70s, been perfectly healthy, but he got sick. He'd been a naval guy. He was out to sea with Merchant Marine. And he was so scared. He had the sheets right up to his eyes, looking around. Every time somebody came in the room, he'd jump. And we really didn't know what was wrong. And we needed a lot of biopsies and things. And unfortunately, I made the mistake of consulting the hematologist that had just arrived from Australia. And so you can imagine when he came into the room and he was trying to be nice, the hematologist, very nice guy, but he didn't realize that his accent was not going to be understood by the patient. And I swear he came in the room and he says, hello, did you come into the hospital to die? Oh, no. And the man goes, he puts the sheets right over. He said, what do you mean die? He said, no, oh, I'm not today. Yes, to die. Yes, you know, he got all flustered, but you've got to be careful who you're going to be talking to the patient. When he got better, he came back and he told me, he says, I bought a juicer. I eat plenty of juice, only I put vodka in mine. He says, sometimes when you got a cold, you take a drink to go to sleep, but when you wake up, you got both a cold and a hangover. And then, you know, I would always say to him, I joke with him, can I take your blood pressure? And he'd say, you're going to give it back? Very, very, you know, funny guy when he was well. And this lady has a condition that I sketched over time. You could see around her eyes, it's called herpes zoster ophthalmologus. And when she got a little bit better, I talked to her one day and she said, I'm feeling old, doctor, ain't like my mother. She and I was walking one day and somebody said we looked like sisters. Well, a compliment to her maybe, but not to me. And her name was Lester. And I finally got up the courage to say, how did a lady get the name Lester? She said, well, my mother and my father picked out a girl's name and a boy's name. My identical twin sister, Virginia, got the girl's name. Or this lady, her name was Portia. I thought that was interesting. I said, really, Portia? What does that mean? Well, I Googled myself, and I'm a deadly spider that kills its mate. I'm a song by Miles Davis. I'm a town in Arkansas, population 457, a brand of birth control, and a moon around the planet Uranus. We had a lady who was very anxious, and we had at that time a new invention called nuclear magnetic resonance imaging, now called MRI. We had to throw out the nuclear because people got so scared. And but she, for some reason, because she had a bum shoulder, she demanded that we give her an MRI. Otherwise, she wasn't going to leave the hospital. Well, she didn't need it, but it's not a matter of radiation. I finally said, okay, we'll go down there. And then within a few minutes, we got a page. She's going crazy. She's disrupting the whole radiologic suite. You've got to come down immediately. I had to go down and calm her down. And I asked her, what was the problem? And she said, I had an old cousin. When I came on the ship to New York, he said, I want to take you to Howe Caverns. But when he got there, he only bought one ticket. I asked why. He said, you're not taking me underground. I'd be going there soon. And that stayed with me, no underground trips. So when they put me in that tunnel to do that test, I got so scared, I started to say the Lord's Prayer. I asked God to forgive me for things, and I told him to stop the test. So doctors, when you're planning trips, don't take old people underground. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, I went on a college tour with my son. He was looking upstate New York, and we came across Howe Caverns, the very same place. I said, we've got to go down there. And lo and behold, it was pretty spooky. That's with all the special lighting, but you can imagine how dark and scary that was. I had a wonderful Dean Emeritus at Emory, and he became a geriatrician after he left academia. And he was literally older than most of the patients he was seeing at the nursing homes that he was helping patients. And I had the chance to sit with him and interview him. He was the first Harvard-trained internist at Grady Hospital in Atlanta. And he would tell me how he would sit for 3 or 4 hours at bedside trying to figure out things and so forth. And almost until he made the diagnosis of a dissecting abdominal aortic aneurysm that was going down into his groin. He got it just before they were about to cut on him thinking it might be an appendicitis. I mean, they would have literally killed him with the first slice. It would have exploded with blood. But I asked him one day, how did you know that you would be that you could be a really good doctor? And what was that titratable moment when you knew this might be something you could do and do well? And so he told me what happened in medical school. I worked for a summer with Dr. Martin L. Dalton. It was the end of my junior year in medical school at the Medical College of Virginia. I'd like to tell you about one house call we made. Now, here was a man, his wife, and his little girl all sick with a fever in August. Dr. Dalton took the tongue temperatures, felt the pulse, pulled off his coat, rolled up his sleeves and said, "You all got typhoid fever here." Well, we gave an enema to one that was distended and did some things that he gave instructions to do. And we inquired who in the neighborhood had typhoid, wasn't afraid of it, who could come and look after them. Then we drove another couple of miles and got a neighbor to come minister to these 3 sick people. Going back home in the Model T, I got the courage to ask, how'd you know so quick they all had typhoid fever? He laughed at me for a mile or two, and then he said, I suppose you want the Weedol test to detect typhoid bacilli in the blood and the blood culture and the stool culture. I answered yes, because those are things I thought you had to know about typhoid. He just laughed and said, it's a typhoid house. No screens on the windows, flies all over the place, pigsty above the spring so it could wash into it. It's just a typhoid house. Oh, bring your tube when we come back to see him next week and get your specimen. I did, and the Weedol test was positive. The Weedol test was invented in 1896, and it is still the gold standard for the diagnosis of salmonella, typhoid salmonella. Isn't that something? And when I interviewed Dr. Wood for an article I wrote for the Emory magazine, he was concerned about the overemphasis on technology and forgetting the patient. The patient will tell you what's the matter with them if you know how to listen. Not always, but frequently. The thing that makes a good doctor, he added, doesn't come out of a medical school or a hospital. You know where it comes from? His home and his early environment. Maybe his pastor, maybe somebody he trusts and loves, somebody who's confident he's worthwhile. Well, here's a man who was describing what happened to him when he had his cardiac catheterization. Everybody been in on a cardiac catheterization and seen how it's done? I urge you to do it because we order them like crazy and we depend on cardiologists. But when you go and have an MRI, if you really want to experience what that lady felt, you can't always be so confident that what you're ordering people is going to be something that they are going to understand. A simple procedure, cataract surgery, explain to them what is going to happen. We just aren't necessarily communicating as well as we could. We think we know because we know, but not necessarily the patient. One of the ways you ascertain that is to do what there used to be a detective on TV called Columbo did. Anybody remember Columbo? Peter Falk, right. Whatever the old channel is that still runs the reruns, right? Watch it. Because he always got his man. He was a detective. He always got the guilty party. And how did he do it? Because he knew pretty soon who it was. But they had some pretty good alibis. But finally, he would always, with his rumpled raincoat, walk out of the door and he'd catch her and he'd turn around and say, just one more thing. And then they would pretty much be contradicting themselves whenever he. But this gentleman, anyhow, went to a cardiac catheterization and he was shaking. Lying on that table, scared, bothered me more than the procedure. That board they had me on looked like a cross. Then they hogtied me when the heart doctors were ready like paratroopers to come in. Wow, I just want to make sure we know that this is not easy, that this is something that they're going to experience. It's a difficult procedure. Well, let me tell you a little story. I had a little pain in my chest here. I don't know whether it was gas pain or not. So the doctor took one of those electro things with all the wires and he said, well, it looked good, but I need more tests. So he sent me for an x-ray like a movie, and he looked at my heart and says, it's okay, but I'm not too satisfied. I want to hear it. So he took me in a room and listened with a microphone and said, I'm not too satisfied. He went and stuck a wire up my leg. On TV, I could see the wire in the heart poking this way and that. It's all right, he said, but I'm not too satisfied. So he sent me running on that moving sidewalk and more tests. And down the line somewhere, he said, well, you're all right, but here, take this medicine anyway. Or this lady reacting to a little tiny office procedure, got so scared, she said, you better just go ahead and do it now because I am mentally prepared for you all to kill me today. And she also said, when we sent her for a mammogram, she said, you know what a mammogram is? You know what that's like? Put your boob on the driveway and tell your boyfriend to back his pickup truck. We had a lady recently that said they operated on my knee and trimmed my hibiscus. I have a wonderful scribe. One of the previous scribes, if you ever have a chance to be a scribe, be a scribe. Even if you're, or it's just the best thing. I've had about 15 of them since we started the program here. I'm so excited. Knock on wood, everybody's gone on to medical school, and some came back when we did a grand rounds about talking about scribes and the history of the medical record. My first 12 years of life, my medical records are 4 index cards. Don't believe that you have to write 1,800 pages of notes. That's computer generated crap. You know, cook boxes and stuff, that's for billing purposes. You want to have good notes, you write a good history. You know, otherwise things will be buried in there. You'll find physical abnormalities that you'll put in there, but they will be buried in the massive data that you have to generate. Try to highlight the things that are really important, and you will really be admired for that. Problem orient your medication list. Don't just write medicines. Don't write 20 medicines down. You'll always be someone who won't know what all of those medicines are for. And if you're ordering a nurse, writing orders to give a medication, and you don't say for what reason, I guarantee you 100% you will experience a wrong medication being given. Hydroxyzine sounds like hydralazine. I can give you many more examples. So please problem orient your notes and your assessments and your plans. The scribe was in the room, and I was saying to a lady, she was 61. I said, you haven't had your cycle in some years, right? And she says, yeah, it's been a few years. And the scribe interrupts, he says, excuse me, is that motorcycle? So, you know, actually. And we read a lot now because of all the new Ozempics and so forth about weight. We have another miracle cure. And this lady said, it ain't much fun to go to Weight Watchers and get up on that scale and see that you're paid to gain weight. I was 11 pounds when I was born, and I've never had a small day in my life, she said. 20 years ago, I belonged to President First Lady when there were fat people there trying to help themselves. Today, you go there, it's a bunch of skinny people showing off. Makes you want to throw up. Or I had another patient who said, I figured it out. I'm 329 pounds, and at my weight, I should be 8'7" tall. So I'm not fat, I'm short. And I once asked a man how he liked that no salt diet I put him on. And he said, well, sort of takes the sting out of diet. I told her, we're going to give you a medication I think could stop your seizures. She said, I don't know why. It's the only exercise I get. That's a pretty crude line, but she actually said that. I said, any problems at home? She said, nothing, just the usual. Chip with my kids, one's a dopehead, the other's 17. Now, I mean, again, you want to ask people what they're really thinking, that's what they'll say. She said, my sister's so mean she could go in the Walmart store and be cussing out the courtesy lady. This lady said, my daughter just left the hospital up in Brandon County. This was in Texas. She says, see, I believe she's got brain damage and is paralyzed. She couldn't walk and they even operated. I think she can walk. Doctors told her she can, but she got so mad at that she walked out of the hospital. This lady was describing the arthritis of her hip. As long as I could stir it around, it'd do pretty good, but if I could just get in there and spray some WD-40 on it, you know. I thought that was so clever until I saw on the newsstand, not too long after that, there was one of these newspapers in the supermarket. It said WD-40 sprays away pain, so maybe she was ahead of her time. She said, since the last time I seen you, I lost a brother-in-law and a 17-year-old grandson. He was at church, and all of a sudden they said it was an aneurysm. Then one of my coworkers died. She had a baby one day, and she had an aneurysm the next. They had a funeral yesterday, but I couldn't go because this hip wouldn't let me go. How can I tell if I have one of them aneurysms? Or this gentleman sitting by himself off in the corner, didn't even want to share to me what his problem was, but finally he said, I got this problem with my nature. It'd get up, but it'd go back before I get to it. So I didn't catch on to what he was talking about. And he said, it used to come and go, but now it just don't go at all. I was thinking of something else because I thought maybe he was talking about constipation. And I gave him Metamucil, which is a laxative. And he comes back about 3 days later, slams the can of Metamucil on the table, says, what the hell are you doing, man? I still can't get up, and now I got the runs too. And then sure enough, walking around the neighborhood, I saw Nature Tonic in some of the neighborhood pharmacies in his area. So I learned from that. After a new patient in the clinic told me he was disabled from a stroke that he'd had 8 years before, I asked him what he did before the stroke. He said, oh, well, I did a little bit of everything. A little bit of cocaine, a little bit of marijuana, a little bit of whiskey. But he also was going for a hearing aid. And he said, the doctor said, Captain, there are going to be a lot of things you don't want to hear. I thought that was a good way to rationalize not getting a hearing aid. And this 93-year-old lady would always come in very feisty, very annoyed, always angry at her son. And they'd be bickering so loudly in the waiting room that I had to rush them, always had to get them back into a room. And she'd always start out the visits by saying, "Hi, doctor, I think I'm done." And finally I said, "Why do you always say you think you're dying?" She said, "Well, to please him for one thing," pointing to her son. And this poor lady, I asked her how her husband was. "Oh, I hate that SOB," she says. 26 years, all his mess. Day we got married, he went home to his mama's and I didn't hear from him for 3 days. Is that physical or mental? It's mental to me. When I got pregnant, he went to his mama's. When I gave birth to my daughter, he went to his mama's and went to bed. It's been that way from the I-do's on. Wow. Or this lady grieving in bed said two things. Our son committed suicide 3 years ago. We had to file for bankruptcy. The only thing I'm really happy about is that my husband stopped drinking and driving for a whole year. She reminded me of the most grateful patient I have ever had, a woman who didn't know that she was going to have an anencephalic baby. And we didn't really know until quite late, but she wanted to go through with it, didn't want to abort or have a section or anything. So went through with this, and she shared me the story. He lived 12 minutes. I wanted him to live long enough to be born, to let his 4 grandparents hold him. And when it came time to die, he would die in my arms. The Lord granted us all 3 of those things. Or this lady, standing by her husband every day for days on end, never left the hospital, by her husband in the ICU. And we were trying to break it to her that he wasn't going to do well. But she was always there, and she explained why. She said, when he had his automobile accident 29 years ago in Louisiana, 15 inches of plastic aorta and punctured lung and all that stuff, the Lord performed 3 miracles. He lived. He was able to walk. He went back to work. I'll be there. Been there 48 years. And I cared for a lot of homeless patients in Houston. Whoop, let's see, is that not moving? Oh, maybe we could freeze it there.
Just click the screen with the mouse and make come back.
Go straight with the mouse. All right, let's see. Does that do anything? Oh, well, we can have a pause and talking. Could you maybe play around with that? In the homeless field, so to speak, I've seen a Berkeley graduate, a banker, a man whose sister is a physician, that was working with me in the Med Center in Texas. A gospel singer who won a regional audition. Oh, is that Rebecca?
I think so.
Oh, thank you. Well, that was Gordon, the patient in Miami that that had been a physician. Long story, but I'll tell you, it's just hard you never know who you're going to meet. And he had hard times and lived on the Bowery and on and on. I started to say I had a gospel singer who won a regional audition to appear nationally on Star Search, but spent the airline ticket on drugs. Former chief phlebotomist at the Ben Taub Hospital in Houston, who helped train doctors and found herself homeless at age 61. She said, "I'm in the homeless field. It's a lot harder job than what I was doing before." But I had a wonderful patient. His name was Kerry. By the way, we'd make house calls. Whenever you see little pockets of woods on highways, generally there are going to be homeless people living there. And I remember going to see him on a house call. And I had a wonderful patient at the center that I led called the Search Center in Houston. That was started by Warren Holloman, who's an ethicist and a brilliant guy who's spoken at our Art of Medicine rounds. And Kerry was just like nobody else. How he survived on the streets, I have no idea to this day, because you get a check and you could go and use that to get some shelter, but he never would. He would always keep his check. He'd get beaten up and robbed. He was like a Forrest Gump, really. He was just so innocent and wonderful, and I would sew him up regularly from being beaten. And I asked him, where did you grow up? And he said, well, my parents sent me to the state school in Austin when I was 9. To teach myself, to teach me to dress myself and balance my checkbook. That's what he said. I said, really? What else did you learn? He said, well, I taught myself to read. How'd you do that? He said, Sesame Street and Vanna White. I said, can you write? He said, oh, they say I write just like a doctor. So, he sold his blood every month, and But I finally got up the nerve to say, Harry, why do you get yourself beaten up like this? Why don't you use the money to go to the shelter? And he confessed that he saved the money. Just once a month, he would take it to the box office of the Houston Grand Opera or the ballet and buy a ticket so he could go in and see the stories that he never heard as a child growing up. We got him a job at the VA hospital, and at Christmas time, he came back and he gave me a ballet calendar by Degas, the painter. I have the original at home. And this was a man who was up in the top floor of St. Luke's Hospital, and is a sweet man, but he had terrible heart failure. And he says, I'm admitted again to St. Joe's on the 18th floor when the door opens up and a Lubavitcher rabbi walks in. Now, this is as orthodox as you can get. And get this man has walked up 18 flights of stairs. See, you don't work on the Sabbath or high holidays, and you don't ride in cars. And he walks all the way from Meyerland, looks me up, then walks up 18 flights of stairs because you don't ride on elevators either. And he's going to say a prayer. I said, you got to be kidding. Then you're going to walk back down 18 flights and then walk home. He says, you're worth it. You're a patient. But he still needed a refreshment. They're so strict in their dietary rules, won't even take a Diet Coke. So I showed him my bag of candies with a circle U, strictly kosher, and he enjoyed them immensely. We see a lot of folks at home. I used to make many more home visits. This lady was wonderful. Her name actually was Bliss, and she died contentedly at home rather than under the technology of the hospital. And this is a recent collage of sketches that I had in a journal called Pulse, which comes out weekly. You can get it for free online. It's called Pulse Voices. And it's been done by family doctors since 2010. And we've had several folks from here have entries and poems and stories, mine or visual contributions. So Pulse, it's pulsevoices.org, and it'll come to your mailbox free every week. And one of our med students had something a few years ago that was terrific. And really a lot of folks that you really would love to talk to, but they're all in tubes and isolated. Some don't speak English. And over the years, quite a few. And also, of course, Alzheimer's disease. A daughter of the lady with Alzheimer's disease saying, it's just like another child that I have to childproof the house for. I asked her once, did you swallow your pill? She says, yeah, I heard it hit bottom. Or do you know where you are? I think I'm right here. Or is it Monday? She said, no, it's Friday. Well, I was close. I mean, there's a beauty to talking to folks who are in Alzheimer's. And like that first story I told about the lady with dementia, there's always hope. And you don't see it very often to see something reversible. She had Lewy body dementia, but she's doing pretty well now. And I think that it needs patience to deal with them. A lady described what it was like to care for an Alzheimer's patient. She says, I know they're trying to tell me something, and it's not what they're saying. I come up with several words that might kick in because their faces will always light up when I hit the right word. I have one lady who I love. Is that you, maybe, baby, my baby? She asked, are you my baby? She just gets a big kick out of me. If they have a worried look, you just smile. You respond to their faces and the tone of their voice. You just try to put them at ease. Most of the stories that I got from the students were the moments that the patients appreciated what they were doing that wasn't medical stuff. And when my son was in the hospital for surgery some years ago, it wasn't the doctors, it wasn't the med students, it wasn't the residents, it was the nurse who knew his pain. It was the nurse who intervened. It was the nurse that led this. It wasn't the med student, it wasn't the resident, it wasn't the attending physician. I'll never forget that. They're into their own agenda. And if you're into your own agenda and you're not putting that patient as your agenda, we talk about patient-centered, that's patient-centered. They were not. So I think it's important to never forget what we're there for. It ain't for us. You've got to keep coughing, I said to one patient. She said, no, I like coffee. A little tea, though, I like. This is a patient with AIDS. And this is his mother commenting on this patient with AIDS. He cleans a birdcage and he's wore out. He's so outcasted and alone. Actually, he didn't really tell me. He gave me a pamphlet. When in my mind, I felt something all the time, something wrong with him when he came home sick from New York. Doctors wouldn't tell me anything. Doctors say, he'll have to tell you. He's homeless now. He has no place to live. He stays under the trees. I work as a helper, says another patient. By the way, another patient with AIDS told me this. I work as a helper. I was a client too. Considering my T cells was up 690, they asked me to help. 11 people done pass on me, people I knew, help change clothes when they mess up, clean up their room. I was like a god keeping them going. Sometimes I think about them, especially the last two, Deborah Williams and Willie Clark. This is a man, I mean, just coming off the street, talking about being a caregiver. That's how he was. And this lady too, I'm just mad. I'm just mad. I'm just mad with HIV. Every time I hear the word HIV, I get mad. I go like twice a week to the group if I go, but sometimes I just get mad. I take Cojet, Prolixin, Haldol, Lithium. I take them in the last week because I didn't take them in the last week because I'm just mad. And that's what it does. If you're not understood by the system, you are alone. And this lovely guy, he brightened my day because I asked him what he did for a living. He says, I'm a trophy warehouse supervisor. I said, a trophy warehouse supervisor? That's interesting. Well, he goes mostly baseball. I said, really? He said, yeah, they give out lots of trophies in baseball. Everybody plays baseball and gets a trophy. Gets lots of trophies, in fact. My son, he's 11. His first year playing baseball, he got 3 trophies. Trophy being on the team, trophy playing second base, trophy for the best spirit or something. And he couldn't even play baseball. But I guess it's just baseball. Whereas football, they give one big trophy to the whole team and get the thing over with. Baseball is what keeping me in business. And this lovely lady, she was actually a minister. And she tried to describe what it was like when she was in the emergency room the other day. I was in the emergency room Sunday morning, my nerves boiled, my head about to blow up. They told me it was anxiety and take some pills. I don't want pills for stress. I want my husband to say good things to me. I want to be loved. At home, at dinner, he sits there. He's very quiet. He has his hands on his lap. So last night I said to him, can you use your hands to do other than sit on your lap? Put them around me. I want to feel it. If you make me feel it, I can be healed. Sweetheart, you can heal me. I don't need any pills. You all I have and I'm all you have. I said to my husband, relax my head and talk to me. What should I say? Oh, put something sweet in my head that I can go with to bed. And he did. And I slept very well. Or this wonderful man just sitting there saying, doctor told me I needed an autopsy. But I said I wanted to wait. And lastly, this lady telling me, you made me feel better. Let me tell you all about my life. May the good Lord take a liking to you, but not too soon. Well, that's Walden Pond, a place that I think about a lot. If I'm looking for a calming mood, I hope to go there sometime. Nobody even knows how deep it is, but that's where Henry David Thoreau spent a year and pretty much on his own and wrote the great book Walden. I hope we have a couple of minutes for a couple of questions and a couple of comments, criticisms, tomatoes, or anything you'd like to say. But with that in mind, I think that's the basic. Now, I also brought, just if anyone wants to look too, these are the 3 books. 2 of them were done by the art department here. These were hand done in a limited edition of about 75, and these were also done by another book arts student. And these were the artworks that I had in the Canadian Medical Association Journal a few years ago. They ran for like 14 months every month. But how about you? Are there other budding artists or other? I know there's at least one. We talked about last night at the Art of Medicine Rounds. By the way, the Art of Medicine Rounds are open to all. Thursday, first Thursday of the month, 5:30 to 6:30. Appreciate so many students being there yesterday. And really, it was for the students that we did this starting in 2012. Try to bring something different. Last night, we had a wonderful poet who's a nurse on the front lines in Houston during the COVID era, and she was just moved us all. Other comments, thoughts, questions? Otherwise, I got to call it something. Speak. Anybody say something?
I'll just share a moment.
Thank you.
I also just
Appreciate you're always coming through. Okay. good.
I also just got out surgery and I had a similar patient where she had a really lengthy and intense surgery. She had a whipple. So that's like they take out part of your pancreas, part of your stomach, and your gallbladder, and they have to reconnect. And you're in the hospital for a long time. And so every day I'm running on her at like 5 to 6 a.m. And every day I'm just asking like, what can I do? And like every day is like little things. Like, well, like they just keep bringing me like strawberry drinks. And it's the only thing I can drink, and I'm allergic to strawberry. And it would be like little things. And then finally, like one day I was like, what can I do for you today? And she was like, just keep smiling. And I was like, And it just got to me because you're right, like sometimes it's like, I don't know where to get the non-strawberry drink, or I can't always like fulfill her request, like she's worried about the IV lines and stuff, but it was just really sweet how she felt like me coming in there and just asking and smiling helped.
I really think that's important. I had one of our she worked here for many years. She would always comment when she'd go to the clinic. She'd always look around and say, I like smiling doctors. And that's important. Sometimes it's hard to smile if you've had a tough day. I want to acknowledge, by the way, too, while others are commenting. Oh, did you have a comment? Other comments? Sure. Any moments in the last few days that you've had? Any thoughts about this? Anything you differently or? Somebody said something. Good.
Yeah, it's this, first I want to say it's really interesting. I really like your article a lot. Thank you so much for doing all that. It reminded me of, have you ever read story by Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyich?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah. Want to share just a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. It's a short novella. It's about a man who's a semi-famous sort of Russian prosecutor. I believe it's a fictional story. I don't actually know whether it's based on a real place or not. But anyway, he's this prosecutor and he ends up hurting himself, and he has a undiagnosed and unknown disease that's killing him. And doctors come from all over to try and treat him, to try and find out what's wrong with him. They all debate with each other to figure out what's wrong with him. But ultimately, they can't figure out what's wrong with him exactly, but they try their various things. And the whole time, he is dealing with the idea of the fact that he believes he's dying. And for him, it's a question of life or death. For the doctors, it appears to be a question of maybe kidney or liver or pancreas or whatever could be wrong with him, right? And it seems to him that they don't see what's wrong. It's hard for him to know. And it feels like everybody's lying. And then the pain associated with the change that he feels from the disease. And it's really compelling. I would recommend reading it if anybody.
Great summary too. Thank you. Yeah, Warren Holloman, the ethicist who started the Compassion series at Baylor, from which I was inspired to do the Art of Medicine rounds, he would always do that reading as the first in his courses on medicine and literature. That's great. Any other thoughts, questions? Any other readings you recommend? Any other books or poems or artworks that you'd like to suggest? This is what we hope to do on this campus, is to really take advantage of all the great, we've had musicians and playwrights and poets and historians, magicians. We had the only deaf PhD student. You know, American Sign Language is the third language of our country besides Spanish. So we're thinking about all the things that we don't know. Just want to acknowledge Ellie Gorman and Cameron Williams and Eddie Higginbotham and Sierra Samuel and Philip Harden and Kendall Campbell and Louis Newman and Andrew Van, who wrote a whole long thing for sending in things. I thought we would have a little bit more time to read some of these. But just would like to reserve 1 minute for any last comments for the good of the order. Things that you might take home from this, you might share with others, or things that you might bring when you return to see patients the next time you're in the wards or in the clinic. Give me a word of wisdom then. What can I do better? Anything you'd like to say?
Well, this was great, like, I don't know, it almost feels like the church or something where you kind of get up, take oversight picture of more than just the medicines and patients don't have to, more in mind. Like, I feel like it's a lot easier to do that in clinic, outpatient, you get more done, like, I feel like you do get back to the hospital. Long list of people see different floors of the hospital, but keeping things in mind like this, taking extra time, explaining things, more communication.
Thank you, Ron. We had a great time working together. But seriously, he was just fantastic. And that's the greatest thing about longitudinal medical students. You get to work and see how they do. I wish they'd started day one in med school. But remember, please, there's always something positive that you could leave with every patient. Think about that. We're giving mostly bad news. Nobody wants to come to the doctor. Normal. And so it's an anxiety-provoking experience, no matter what it is. So try to leave somebody with some positive, and also figure out a way to use these 4 words in any way you can to facilitate that. You can be well. It may be hard. Someone's not doing well, but you can be well. And you don't have to say those exact 4 words, but make it positive before you've left the room. and you want to hear and see how it's received too. You want to make sure that they have understood you as well as you think you've understood them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Please join me.